So this is part 2 of talking about archival considerations for tarot decks and tarot deck collectors, because I consider myself a collector. I know there are a lot of us out there. Some people are more into, I gotta use all my decks. Some people collect them. I'm the latter. I collect them. I also use them, but I do love a good, solid, beautiful collector's deck that I will probably only touch a few times in my life. So last time I teased that I had actually talked to and emailed one of the archivists at Tulane University, where they have a small, only 10 tarot deck collection. And so I'll read you the email. This is from Bernadette Berzer. And thank you for your interest in our tarot cards. We're finding they're becoming a very popular and really great way to get students into archives. That is amazing. Archives are, kind of stodgy and kind of dusty, and, the whole mentality. Students don't really gravitate to archival things, but anything can get them interested in archives. It's pretty cool. We started collecting contemporary cards in 2019, so they're already in mint condition and very low maintenance as far as preservation. Pretty good for us collectors, because if we get them in mint condition, like this is the Paradoxical Blue edition of I want to get the name right because I always screw it up, the Trionfani della Luna Paradoxical Blue. So the card, I've only handled these a few times. It came in a signed little cover, and they're rather glossy. I keep them in the box, and so not too much to worry about as long as I keep them in the box, handle them with clean hands, they should be fine. Another factor that makes our collection low maintenance is our consistent archives environment, temperature, and humidity. This makes a huge difference! Exclamation. Last video I talked about temperature and light, and if in an archival situation you have filtered air, you have consistent temperatures. Remember I talked about that, was it 68 degrees plus or minus 2, and humidity, relative humidity 35% plus or minus 2, and of course considerations for UV light. We store our cards in archival drawers that are labeled and inventoried in our online database. And I showed you the finding aid that's inventoried, and they have an online database, their repository. Gaylord and Demco, mainly Gaylord though, are big in the library world as far as providing acid-free solutions to storing items. And the link that she sent me, the storage boxes from Gaylord, it's a 3-drawer hard paperboard thing where you can store items. To guess, I'd say you could probably store about 40 tarot decks in there if you bought one. But Gaylord preservation, artifact, collectibles preservation, trays, dividers, storage boxes, and this was called the E-Flute Drawer Box, BE Flute Drawer Box. So it had 3 drawers. Great. I think it was about $60. Acid-free, protects from light, pretty cool. As far as packaging, we remove any unneeded product packaging and use archival plastic bags and ties to repackage the deck so they fit in the drawer. Chloe Raub, head of Newcomb Archives, has an article on Archival Outlook about our method, and I showed you that before, and it's in the October issue of, here it is, Tarot Decks in the Ivory Tower, Chloe Raub, Newcomb Archives, Tulane University, Archival Outlook, September, October 2021. This is freely available online if you look for it. And then she mentions I think ultimately it's the best use of paper preservation guides like any DCCs. They have a great site for referencing, dealing with paper quality, dealing with archival situations, planning, things like that. Great information. To determine a plan of care that will fit the tarot and play deck cards that you are storing. If you are storing old, rare, antiquated card decks, I definitely talk to a rare book and or artist book librarian. The Rare Book School may have some contacts for you, and they have the link, and California Rare Book School right there. And so she did that for me. I really appreciate it. She did that yesterday for me. Now, one thing that I always go to is the Library of Congress. If you have been in library school, you know the Library of Congress has a lot of things that can help you as far as dealing with different types of things in your career. And this is talking about paper deterioration, and paper is made of cellulose, a repeating chain of glucose molecules derived from plant cell walls. One measure of paper quality is how long these cellulose chains and subsequently paper fibers are. Long fiber paper is stronger, more flexible, and durable. In the last video, I talked about how short fiber paper it typically is found in recycled paper. So over time, it becomes brittle. It falls apart more easily than longer fibered paper. Before the mid-19th century, Western paper was made from cotton and linen clothing rags by a process that largely preserved the long fibers of the raw material. In some instances, they actually use mummies from Egypt, the wrappings from their linen, to actually make paper because there were so many mummies and so much was destroyed. It's really a shame about that. Starting in the mid-19th century, wood replaced rags as the raw material for paper manufacture. Wood is processed into paper by mechanical or chemical pulping, which produces paper with shorter compared to rag paper with fibers. Rag paper, a lot of the rag papers and newspapers were made with mummy linen wrappings. How awful is that? Mechanical pulping produces paper of the shortest fiber length and does not remove lignin from the wood, which promotes acid hydrolysis. Newspapers are printed on mechanically pulped paper. Chemical pulping removes lignin and does not cut up the cellulose chains as thoroughly as mechanical pulping, yielding a comparatively stronger paper, but it's still not as durable as rag paper. Wood pulp paper from before 1980s also tends to be acidic from alum rosin sizing added to the paper to reduce absorbency and minimize bleeding of inks, which, in the presence of moisture, generates sulfuric acid, which is very destructive. Acids also form in paper by the absorption of pollutants, mainly sulfur and nitrogen oxides. Book leaves that are more brown and brittle along the edges than in the center clearly illustrate the absorption of pollutants from the air. So if you've ever had a book and the edges are like a darker brown than the inside, that's what's happening to that. A lot of poorly published items, especially older 20s, 30s, 40s, are guilty of that. Research by the Library of Congress has demonstrated that cellulose itself generates acid as it ages, including formic, acidic, lactic, and oxalic acids. Measurable quantities of these acids were observed to form under ambient conditions within weeks of the paper's manufacture. Moreover, paper does not readily release these acids due to strong intermolecular bonding. That's what explains why pH-neutral papers become increasingly acidic as they age. Acids form in alkaline paper as well, but can be neutralized by an alkaline reserve. Most acid-free papers now have an alkaline reserve built in, so they're more alkaline to take into effect the degradation of the paper. Beside acid hydrolysis, paper is susceptible to photolytic damage by light and oxidative degradation. That's oxygen interacting with things. Photodegradation appears to progress more severely and rapidly in poorer quality papers. There is no rescuing anything from photodegradation. Once UV light tears something up, there's no going back. The role of oxidative degradation appears limited compared with acid hydrolysis, except in the presence of nitrogen oxide pollutants. So this one talks about cooler temperatures, 30 to 40% humidity, are able to last long, even hundreds of years. Artificial or accelerated aging tests for paper. Let's see, we got elevated temperatures, artificial aging tests, moisture plays in the acid hydrolysis of paper. A 5-year research effort completed in 2000 at the Library of Congress showed similar chemical products formed during natural and accelerated aging of paper. Moreover, when naturally aged papers were subsequently subjected to accelerated aging in the laboratory, degradation products from natural aging simply increased in concentration by predictable proportions. So let's see, this is important for modern paper. 1980s paper manufacturers began adding alkaline buffers to wood pulp papers intended for lasting use, and today this is a common practice. Alkaline buffers retard or prevent acid hydrolysis by neutralizing acids that attack cellulose chains. Alkaline wood pulp papers stored under good conditions are long-lasting. Since the 1990s, books published in the U.S. that conform to ANSI and NISO paper permanent standards, that's C3948, 1992, are likely to be printed on chemically purified wood pulp alkaline paper. Alkaline papers made of chemically purified wood pulp, high alpha cellulose mixed with cotton, are also available and recommended for permanent documents. So, here, the last thing is improving environmental storage conditions, regardless of whether the item can be deacidified, will also significantly slow the rate of degradation and extend the useful life of paper items. So, some of the things I'm concerned about are, so here we have, here this is from the Valentino Visconti Tarot by it's the Solioni edition in Italy in 1982. I don't believe there's any yellowing here. This seems like it could be cotton based, but I'm not certain. Beautiful card of Il Matto. And this one comes in a little wrapper. I would question the acidic nature of the wrapper. It also came with 2 little books. This one has yellowed more than this one, which means there's a higher acid content in this one. Oh, you can see along the spine of this there is some darkening, and this one is very cheaply printed. It's very yellow, and it has a slight smell. So the best thing to do would be to keep these away from the actual cards themselves, or otherwise it would discolor them. So probably best practice would be to put these, at least a buffer between them, a piece of paper, and the cardstock box itself does not seem to be yellowing terribly. So I would just to separate it from the cards, I'd put them separately. I think that might be the best thing to do, because it's cards we're interested in. The booklets are great, but the booklets themselves can be problematic. There we go. And I'm just going to keep them separate. So this is a card from the Tarocchi Ghisi, which I believe was done in the 90s, and because of the paper quality, I believe it was. The back seems to be almost uncoated, but the front, that shininess of the paper is the clay, or it could be just the inks itself making that shiny color. So I'm not really too worried about this. So decks from the 90s, I believe my opinion is that we're okay. Ones that are from earlier times. Now this one's from 2000. This is a Il Meninghello deck. I'm looking to see if there is any yellowing. It seems to be perfectly fine. We have no bleeding in the ink here. Sometimes that's a sign that something is going wrong with the paper. And the yellowing around here is probably just the way it's printed. The cool thing about this is it has its own microclimate. If we use the box, we seal off oxygen mainly from it. Now the booklet itself, this is an older booklet. It looks like it's slightly yellowing. Obviously the paper is different, and I can smell there's a slight smell from it. I'd probably want to keep these away from the cards unless I want it to sort of affect the cards. I'm going to put this back on there. Of course, the box isn't hermetically sealed, so there is some oxygen there. Some newer decks, and this is from the Garden of Eros. Garden of Eros, the UC, the Garden of Love, Tarot Eros. So we have, first of all, we have a sticker here, adhesion. We have two. Actually, just one that's embossed. So over time, this may become, the gum may dry out. It may pop off. I noticed I didn't break the seal. I went from the bottom. This paper seems to be fairly inert. This was made in just a few years ago. Maybe less than 5 years ago, so I'm sure they adhere to standards. And this deck actually has sort of one of the playing card finish, that linen air glide finish. So I would venture to guess these are plastic coated, which means there's plastic, which that in itself is different than paper and can do its own thing over time as far as the esters of the plastic breaking down, gassing, degassing, and just being a little problematic. But get these cards out. So I think the thing, most papers now, especially since the 90s, I would venture to guess you're pretty set. When you are dealing with older decks and older papers, you need to be aware that there may be issues with acidification, and especially with booklets that are touching cards. Be aware of those. This was the Garden of Eros is 2017, so very cool. Very cool deck. I love this deck. It was a gift to me. I'm happy with it. If I could get the damn thing back in without tearing it up. And then this is the Paradoxical Blue by Patrick Valenza. And again, this is a modern deck. Probably this will last quite a while. The paper is, I'm venturing to guess it is acid-free, as most paper seems to be. Unless artists cut corners, I think it will be perfectly fine. So no need to worry about special archival things, which is good. So in the next episode that I'll put out, we're going to look at a paper book that I've actually shown. It's from the 1700s, and look at the paper. And then a book from the earlier, maybe the 60s, 70s, or 80s, maybe even the 1930s, and then a modern book, just to look at the paper to get an understanding of how paper is reacting to our environment that we are in, which can be going against our preservation tactics. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I've included some links to some places that I mentioned in the video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out tarotfellow.com for shopping. Be sure to check out tarotfellow.com for all your spiritual needs. It has a Be sure to check out tarotfellow.com for all your spiritual needs. Be sure to check out tarotfellow.com for all your shopping for your spiritual. Be sure to check out tarotfellow.com to shop for all your No. Get that shit out there. Be sure to check out tarotfellow.com to shop for all your spiritual needs, as well as book readings and other services with Rick.